Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Kushagra Goel and very warm greetings from Dr. Tutorial. So yesterday we talked about how as we approach closer to the examination, we'll focus more on specific news for 2021 candidates. And I also told you that I will be talking about news that is generally relevant for everyone else also, right? So don't worry, we'll not be skipping that part. So moving on in terms of doubts yesterday, so a lot as I explained yesterday through illustrations about base erosion. So the follow-up question was, does base erosion happen due to profit shifting? Yes, and sometimes there can be other reasons also for base erosion. However, in terms of OECD and G7 group of nations agreement, profit shifting is the cause of base erosion, which leads to lower tax revenue for the governments. Another question then therefore all of you asked was, why do these other countries keep their tax ratios so low? So look at, if you compare the size of, let's say, Switzerland in comparison to United States, right? Switzerland is a very tiny place, so it lacks a lot of natural resources. How can you grow your economy? You have mineral resources that you can sell off. You have international universities or technology groups where you innovate and sell the technology, or else what you can do is provide banking services, right? Banking services where people park their monies or park their investment. That is precisely what these investment locations are. They grow as city state based on investment that pours in because people want to save their taxes, right? So another example is the Principality of Monaco. Monaco started out as a city state because of its casino, but then it has now evolved into not only a casino but also tax safe haven for people from European Union. So that is how these countries are able to generate revenue. See, if people are putting their investments, there are certain people who are being employed. The size of employment generation required in these small countries is very minuscule. 10,000, 15,000 people, that's all, right? Or sometimes even 1 lakh, and that's about it. That is the only aim of these economies. They don't have, for example, in India, where the working force is 600 million or strong. So that is where the difference lies, all right? Then moving on, another doubt that students had is, what about these companies which are physically present, unlike the digital companies such as Google or Amazon? So they also have to pay corporate taxes to both countries, at their home countries or at another country where they are earning profit. So if you notice, multinational corporations such as companies such as Hyundai, which is a South Korean company, or Ford, for example. So whenever you purchase, if you have ever seen, they have subsidiary companies in India or a tie-up. For example, there is Maruti Suzuki. So Suzuki is a company that sells cars in Japan. It has a tie-up with the Indian company, right? Or earlier there was Hero Honda. So this is another way that companies are able to get reduced taxes. So they don't have to pay taxes at both the places. For example, where they are originally from and where they are working. So revenue, for example, from Hyundai India is limited or taxed in India. And the revenue generated by Hyundai South Korea is taxed in South Korea. So that is how they save taxes and avoid duplication of all taxes also, all right? Then moving on, another doubt was, how can you all cover space programs as a whole? Now, the question in itself is a little problematic. Why? Because see, what can you be asked on a whole? A question, for example, which planet in the solar system has the highest number of moons? That can be a common question related to space. But a question related to Chinese space program would be within Chinese space program heading only, right? So if you get a passage related to Chinese space program and part of it would be Martian or let's say lunar exploration or scientific knowledge about the moon or the Mars as a planet. So space missions will be part or purpose related to the company that is in question, all right, or the country that is in question, and will not be mixed and matched, all right? That one In the passage, you'll get one question from SpaceX and one from that. You have to prepare for these topics in isolation. If they come together, then that is a thing that you'll have to deal in CLAT. But however, your clarity of answering these questions will only come when you study them in isolation. So you don't have to study these space programs as a whole. Space program, then Chinese space program, US space programs, and then private company space program, UAE space program, Indian space program. That is how you have to list out your headings and prepare your current affairs notes. Alright. Then moving on, another doubt that was there was related to how does in general, what for those students who haven't been able to keep up with current affairs, all right, that who haven't been very regular with current affairs, how do you prepare for current affairs? Now my response to those students is that, see, even if you have missed the bus, you should focus on important topics. All right, in terms of important topics you've been asking, we have told you that once the new date of the examination is announced, we will release the revision series, because the purpose of revision is also to target those students who haven't been very regular with the series. For all of those who have been regular with the series, you already know the important things. In the revision series, I'm not going to repeat everything that we have done over the past 6-7 months. That is precisely not the purpose. Someone who has studied 30 videos per month and then looks at a 20-minute video to cover current affairs, obviously there will be some amount of information that will be dropped. But the purpose of a revision series is to refresh your memory, and also for those students who haven't covered current affairs on a regular basis. All right. So don't worry, we'll wait for the new date to be announced, and then the revision series will be released. All right. So moving on to today's newspaper. On the front page, there is absolutely no news important for all of you. Different politicians, political circles, as the elections in Uttar Pradesh approach closer. Uttar Pradesh is important because it sends the highest number of seats to the Lok Sabha. Whichever party has had the majority seats in Uttar Pradesh has been able to rule the government at the center. So therefore, this is the news about it, that Uttar Pradesh becomes important. Then apart from that, Mukul Roy, leader who left Trinamool Congress to join BJP, has returned to the Trinamool Congress after leaving the party. So a turncoat coming back home. Apart from this, on the national news, in terms of news related to IS, on the front page and on the second page, all right, center unlikely to allow 4 Kerala women who joined ISIS. And then on the national page, court seeks jail reply to allegations by ISIS member. Now, in terms of both this news, what you need to focus on is something I'm going to respond in the editorial section. All right, there is an article there that is relevant. Apart from this, on this side, news not relevant for us. Then moving on, Brew refugee rehabilitation in Tripura hits green panel hurdle. Now, Brew refugees is an incident related to what happened in Mizoram and those people who have been now rehabilitated in Tripura. This is an internal displacement of people. Refugees are not just people who move from one country to another country. People or communities can be internally displaced also. For example, Kashmiri Pandits, or for example, in earlier times, it was the nomadic tribes who later on became settlers. For example, tribes in Rajasthan today, or they were earlier pastoralists. So it can also happen internally. All right, Brew refugee is an example of that. And in terms of their rehabilitation that is to take place in Tripura, that is what has taken a backseat. It has hit green panel hurdle. For us, what is important is the concept of refugees and internal displacement. All right, that is first thing. And secondly, in terms of rehabilitation, so the government has a responsibility to ensure rehabilitation of those communities that are internally displaced. All right. The area related to the conflict also becomes important. Bru refugees originally from Mizoram, Bru as a tribe, they are also called as Riyangs. All right. And they have been living in relief camps in Tripura since 1997. All right. Then moving on, Italy has paid 10 crores, Center tells Supreme Court. This is related to the Italian Marines case. The government, the Supreme Court had ordered that the Italian government should pay this much amount of compensation to the two families of the fishermen and also to the person who owned the boat. That money has now been received by the central government and it will be transferred to an account of the Supreme Court, from where the family members will be ordered. Now, two things that you need to understand. One, the moment this transaction is complete, Indian law enforcement bodies lose jurisdiction to prosecute these Italian Marines. The two Italian Marines, Salvatore Giron and Massimiliano Latorre, both of them had accidentally shot fishermen of Kerala, thinking that they were pirates. In terms of this, one, that whosoever commits crime in territory of India is supposed to be governed by the laws of India. In terms of this, then a request was made by the Italian government that please let us take action against them and we will provide compensation to those who have suffered because of this incident. In terms of that, this is what was decided. Now Indian government loses jurisdiction to prosecute the Italian Marines, who will now be prosecuted in Italy. Then moving on the editorial front. So the main editorial, refocused vaccination campaigns are possible. This one calls that there should be priority given in terms of vaccination, especially to women or those population that are at higher risk, for example, frontline workers or Adivasi communities or communities that have lower health infrastructure, because then they are at a higher risk of mortality. All right. Then on the left hand side, counting the dead, measuring the excess death is the best possible way to estimate the count of COVID-19. In terms of this is relation to the news about revision of death figures in Bihar that has taken place, and it calls that in a lot of states such as Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, there are two problems. One, in India and in states at large, there is a problem of non-registration of deaths. Unlike Kerala, for example, in Bihar, only 34% of the people who pass away, their deaths are actually registered in government database. Therefore, a survey needs to be conducted to estimate the actual count of deaths in terms of COVID-19. So that, why is this important? Is because future planning and planning in terms of health infrastructure can be done to prevent further deaths on the upcoming waves if they are to come. Then moving on, monsoon malady. This is talking about the crumbling infrastructure in Mumbai and how infrastructure needs to be revised and replaced over time. Otherwise, tragedies such as what happened in Mumbai, where housing structures collapse under incessant rain, and over the coming decades and centuries, this is only going to increase because of climate change. So there now needs to be a specific model to do this. However, the one that is most important for us is the signal from Iran presidential election is clear. Iran is slated to have its presidential elections this year. And so two things that you need to note down. Iran is a theocratic democracy which uses a pseudo-parliament presidential system of elections. It is very similar to what happens in US, but there is one added layer, that it is a theocratic state where a religious figure is at the head and the president works below him. In United States, or for example in India, the elected figure, that is the president or the council of ministers, they are the final decision making body. However, in a theocratic state, a religious figure reigns supreme over the elected representative. Alright. So now I am going to use two illustrations from Wall Street Journal and ResearchGate to explain you the political system of Iran. It is very complex, but you can be asked questions. Last year there was a question related to the system in Israel. It is possible it can happen again. So things that you need to note down. Iran's news system is in place since 1979. In 1979, a Islamic revolution took place in Iran, alright, and a referendum was conducted in the country. Everyone above the age of 15 voted in the referendum and the new constitution was adopted. In 1989, amendments were brought in, and in 2017 another amendment. Based on this, every person above the age of 18 can vote in Iran for elected bodies. Alright, so voters are people above the age of 18. Alright, now what do the voters do and what is the system there? Alright, so for that, first understand what are the bodies that are there. So there is the supreme leader. His name is Ayatollah Khamenei. Alright, there is a president. Right now it is Hassan Rouhani. Alright, and there is these other bodies. Alright, the president works along with the cabinet and a parliament. We all know what a parliament does: introduces laws, passes laws. Alright, the president is the one who finally approves them. However, the supreme leader is the one that finally confirms them. Alright, so now I'm moving to the Wall Street Journal illustration. So what happens here? Elections take place, voters. Alright, this is an older illustration. The head of judiciary has changed. The current head of judiciary is slated to be appointed or is running as the new president. Alright, now this illustration is going to help you understand. The black lines illustrate election, direct election, then appointments. The gray line reflects where appointments take place, and then vetting, who vets the election of whom. So voters directly vote for the president, voters directly vote for parliamentarians, voters directly vote for people on the assembly of experts. This is the total seat. Now who can run for president? That is determined by the Guardian Council. This Guardian Council, alright, is not elected. So who can run for elections in any of these houses where people can vote is done by this Guardian Council, which is not elected. Appointments to this Guardian Council are done by the supreme leader. He appoints 6 of them. 6 of them are appointed by the judiciary. The judicial head is appointed by the supreme leader himself. Alright, now, and who appoints the supreme leader? It is the assembly of experts. Alright, now it is very complex, unlike India where people elect everyone and then Rajya Sabha members are indirectly elected by the members who are elected by the people. Here there is no real clarity. Alright, it is all based on religious theocracy. That is, supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, he is a Shia Muslim. He appoints 6 to the Guardian Council. He appoints the head of judiciary. The head of judiciary appoints the other 6. Now, by virtue of head of judiciary being appointed by the supreme leader, these 6 appointments are also passive approval of the supreme leader himself. So he decides the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council then vets who can run in president, parliament and assembly elections. Alright, now for example, if those, so any and everyone can fill in the form to show interest to run as president. However, the Guardian Council decides who can actually run in the race. This year in 2021, the candidates who have been approved are only those who are hardline Islamist and not moderate like Hassan Rouhani himself. Alright, so the system or the government in Iran will now be more hardline Islamist. That is the scene that will happen now. Alright, this is the system. Every 4 years the president is elected. Alright, and This is the supreme elected representative of the people of Iran. Alright. Now we focus back to the editorial. Okay. These illustrations, you can take their screenshots. The link to the illustration will also be provided in the description box where you can download it from and make your own notes. Alright. Any doubts about it? First, read this article. Alright. I'm going to explain you this also. And then whatever doubts you have, feel free to put it in the comment section. Now the signal from Iran presidential election is clear. The non-transparent process of candidate selection has carefully rejected reformists and focused on hardliners. There are two realities that you need to know of Iran right now. One, it is a theocratic state. Two, it is a Shia majority state. And by virtue of that, it is a sworn enemy of two countries. One, the Sunni majority Muslim world, which is led by Saudi Arabia. And second, of Israel and United States, who are seen as natural enemies of the Islamic State of Iran. Alright. In 2018, Donald Trump imposed harsh economic sanctions on Iran. Since then, Iran's economy has been crumbling. Alright. Inflation has risen to 50%. The value of currency has reduced, alright, by 4-fold times. Okay. That means the economic despair is humongous there. Now, conversation to remove sanctions has been ongoing. However, that will now more likely be towards the hardliners. Why? Because the process of who becomes the president is selected by the Guardian Council. This year, they have selected or vetted only those candidates that are hardline or considered hardline Islamists. Alright. The one who is at the front runner in election is Ibrahim Raisi. In 2017, he had become the primary opponent and lost the election. Right now, Ibrahim Raisi is the chief of judiciary of Iran. He succeeded Sadiq Larijani and is currently the head of judiciary. So he is already a candidate who is favorite of the supreme leader. Hassan Rouhani wasn't a favorite of the supreme leader, but he was the favorite of the people. In 2017, 73% population voted in the election and 60% of the voters voted for Hassan Rouhani himself. Alright. So he was a majority favorite candidate. In comparison, in India, in the most recent elections also, the Bharatiya Janata Party was only voted by 38% of the people who voted in India, despite Prime Minister Modi now in his second tenure, right? So this is how much popular Hassan Rouhani is in his own country, alright? But now the supreme leader obviously wants more hardliner candidates. What can be the after effects of a hardline candidate? Two things. First, the trouble with United States will carry on, because as long as hardliners rule in Iran, the threat of radical Islam spreading beyond Iran is real. The second is hardliners are unwilling to have peace within Syria and with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. That is where the problem is. The two current conflicts in Middle East right now. So first is Syria. Alright. In Syria, it is Islamic State. To reign in Islamic State, the efforts of Iran were humongous. Because of support of Iran, the current government in Syria has retained power. Along with that, Islamic State has lost control. Alright. The second part is the Houthi rebels in Yemen are supported by the Iranian government. Their peace or ceasefire agreement on that regard is very unlikely, because the hardliners want to have a conflict ongoing with Saudi Arabia. The hardliners on a domestic level will also be unlikely to focus more on economy and continue with their hardline religious agenda. 60% of the population of Iran is in middle class, and they believe in modernist and reformist who focus on economy. They are now being seen as to be disillusioned with the government that could get elected in the new presidential election. So this is the scenario from CLAT perspective. First is the election system in Iran that becomes important. It is constitutional society with theocratic democracy. Supreme leader along with the president. Every 4 years election happen. The candidates who can run for election are vetted by a guardian council that is appointed by the supreme leader and the head of judiciary. Alright. This year only hardline candidates have been vetted, and the economic realities of Iran is known to you. The conflicts in which it is engaged is also important. Alright. So therefore this is the situation in Iran. It becomes important in terms of CLAT 2021 and beyond. Iran is a country that is closer to India, so a situation of non-sanctions on Iran is good for India in general. Right now fuel prices are rising. However, India had lobbied Saudi Arabia to increase production to reduce prices. That hadn't happened. That would have taken place if Iran was actively able to supply oil to India. Therefore, India's interest is in revoking of sanctions. Irrespective of whosoever comes in power in Iran, India's relationship with Iran is going to continue. Whether it's modernist or hardliners, doesn't matter for India. Then moving on the other national news is Pakistan passes bill to let Jadhav appeal. This is related to Kulbhushan Jadhav's case. ICJ, that is the International Court of Justice, had passed a judgment that he should be provided with consular access and the right to appeal. That had been denied to Kulbhushan Jadhav. He has been arrested in Pakistan for espionage and spy on the Pakistan government. He's slated to be a former Indian Navy officer and has been in custody of Pakistan. Now Pakistan has passed a bill to let Jadhav appeal. Alright. Apart from this, moving on, the other national news, nothing of note for us. US FDA move won't hit India. What is this related to? FDA, the medical body in United States, rejected the application of Covaxin for emergency use in the United States, primarily because of lack of clinical trial data of phase 3. That data has not been provided in India also. Indian government still went ahead with the vaccine. US has decided that it won't until that data is provided. Unless that data is provided, WHO is also not going to approve the vaccine for the world. Then moving on the international page. So G7 summit is ongoing this weekend. The members of G7, UK, US, Canada, France, Germany, Italy and Japan. The G7 countries. Also along with them are 4 official invitees this year: India, South Korea, Australia and South Africa. All 4 of them are special invitees. Prime Minister Modi would have attended the summit in person. However, because of COVID situation in India, he has decided not to. Now 2 things are important. First, from G7 summit is that 1 billion vaccines will be supplied by G7 countries to the world. United Kingdom will supply 100 million. United States will apply 500 million vaccines. Alright, and second is their global minimum tax. These countries are going to agree to a 15% minimum taxation in their country to avoid shifting of profits and base erosion. Then 2 things apart from this is on the right hand side, Hong Kong can ban films over national security. So now as Hong Kong now formally becomes a part of China, the system that is there in China where you cannot criticize the government, the Chinese Communist Party controls the entire media information, That will now happen in Hong Kong. And now the move is movies that violate national security or are critical of the government can now be banned by the censor. The recently multiple documentaries had shot to international fame that had covered the protest in Hong Kong, and that is why this move was seen necessary by the Communist Party. Alright, then on the right hand side, China Sri Lanka Friendship Hospital. This is a hospital that Chinese government has built in Sri Lanka. It is part of assistance Chinese grant of 660 million US dollars. It is going to focus on kidney ailments. That has been a chronic problem in the region where it is being built. India, since its independence, has provided Sri Lanka with an assistance of 570 million. The current government of Sri Lanka is closer to the Chinese, that is the Rajpaksas. Because of this, a cultural center that India had built in Jaffna region, which is majoritated by minorities in Sri Lanka, has not yet been inaugurated for a year of its completion. So it shows where the government of Sri Lanka wants to extend its assistance. China has also extended currency swap and also a 90 million grant to Sri Lanka. Alright. Then apart from this, on the sporting business page, nothing of real note. On sporting side, there is news of another person in news. This can be important in terms of AILET examination from Sporting Prime. Olympian Suraj Singh passes away. He was the first Indian to participate in marathon events in Olympics and represented India there. He passed away yesterday. He was also a bronze medalist in the first Asian Games that were held in 1951. So India hosted the first Asian Games. That was an idea brainchild of our very first Prime Minister, and that is why New Delhi had hosted the first Asian Games. Suraj Singh was a medalist in that event also. So this can be an important question or a person in news from AILET point of view. On that note, I'll conclude for the day. Alright, in terms of news, the Iran issue becomes very important. Please read the article carefully. Whatever doubts you have, ask me and put it in the comment section. Note down the illustrations, make your notes, and tomorrow also I'll take your doubts on that regard. On that point, I'll conclude for the day. Take care all of you, and I'll see you all tomorrow.